Hi everybody. In this video, we're going to learn how to deploy our NodeJS app to a Google Cloud virtual machine. So let's get started. So the first step is the sensible one is we've developed our code on our laptop and we've done rigorous testing on our laptop. So we're not doing any testing in Google Cloud. We're not developing code in Google Cloud. We're doing everything on our laptop. So here I am in my task 4 that I developed on my laptop. And let's just run it just to make sure it works. And here's my Postman file, and I can search Three Rivers. I can search Magdalena, and I've gone through all of my tests, which I'm not going to show now, but I know my code works, or at least I think my code works. So let's leave it at that. So that was the first step. Let me stop my server. And the next thing I did was I've been saving in Git periodically as I'm developing my code so I don't lose anything or if I want to go back to some previous version. But the last thing I'm going to do is push it to GitHub. So I'm going to make sure my code is in GitHub, and I've done that, but I'm just going to do git status to make sure I've done so. So that's my prerequisite, is that I have working code on my laptop, my development machine, before I'm going to deploy my code. All right, so let's go off to Google Cloud Console. So here I am at the Google Cloud Platform, and I'm going to create a brand new virtual machine. So I'm going to go to this menu, the navigation menu, click on it, select Compute Engine toward the bottom here, and on the top of the next one, select VM instances. So I have some virtual machines up and running currently. These green ones mean that they're running. This one's a fairly large instance, so I don't keep it running unless I'm using it. So I have these instances, but I'm going to create a brand new one for this project. And I'm going to go up here where it says Create Instance and select it. Here I can give it a name. I'm going to call it DB work, let's say. Labels, I don't need the region, which is permanent. You're going to select anything but Northern Virginia. Northern Virginia, you can't get a free instance there. You could select Northern Virginia, but then you're going to have to pay for it. So that's fine. I'm not saying don't do it. But if you're looking for a free micro instance, don't select it. I'm going to select something close to me. Why not? I'll select Salt Lake City. That seems to be the closest. And these, I used to be careful on these. If you do some Googling, you can find where the most current, newest machines are. But I'm just going to leave it. The rule of thumb is that if you select the later letter in the alphabet, the likelihood of that you'll have a newer machine, but I don't know if that's true anymore. So I'm just going to keep that. General purpose E2 looks good. This machine type E2 medium with 4 gigs of memory, that's almost $30 a month. I'm going to change this to a micro instance. That brings it down to $782, but keep it in mind that you get a free instance as long as you're not in Northern Virginia. All right. So I'm not going to select these containerization techniques. And by default, it's Debian GNU Linux. I don't want to use that. I'm going to use Ubuntu. So I'm going to select Ubuntu here. And I'm going to go with the latest long-term service agreement, Ubuntu, which is 20.04. 10 gigs of a disk is fine. So I'm going to select it. These I'm keeping the same. The firewall, since we're developing an HTTP server, I'm going to allow HTTP traffic. And finally, I'm going to create this instance. You can see that it's working there. That twirly little circle means it's creating that virtual machine. And now it's done. So we can SSH into that machine. So I'm going to press this SSH. And it's going to give me a warning, perhaps. Yes, connect without identity-aware proxy. All right, and here we are into that virtual machine. It gives us all sorts of information about it. I'm going to make it bigger so it's more ugly, but more legible, and clear the machine. All right, and the first thing we can do is I'm going to install the Nginx server, the web server. We're going to be using it as a reverse proxy server, but we're going to start with just the basic install. So in order to do that, I'm going to sudo apt update. So just update the package list so we get the latest version of all these things. Sweet. So the next thing we do is let me clear. is let's install Nginx. And so that would be sudo apt install, and Nginx is spelled that way. And I'm going to hit yes here, and it's installing Nginx. Okay, we have Nginx running, so the next thing we do is test to make sure it's running. It's going to be running, but it's nice to know that it is. All right, so back to our Google Cloud Platform panel of the browser we're in. You can see that we have an external IP here. I'm just going to click that thing that looks like an arrow shooting out of a box, so it opens up a terminal, and it says, welcome to Nginx. Your web server is successfully installed. So yay us, we've installed the web server. We don't need to install this first. It just happens that that's what I installed here. We can do these things in any order. Next, let's install Postgresql. Maybe. There we go. And it's the same command, basically, sudo apt install Postgresql. And I'm going to install some additional packages. Oop. And a big yes for that. We're almost done. All right, and let me clear. Let's set a password for the user Postgres. So sudo -u Postgres, so the user's Postgres, and the command we want to execute as Postgres is PSQL. We're in Postgres, and I'm setting my password. I'm going to quit and log in the regular way just to make sure my password works. Hey, cool. My password's working fine, so I'm going to quit here. Okay, the next thing is let's get our Git repository, and that seems like something useful to do. So I'm going to my repository to get it. Let me just find the one I want. There it is. And I'm going to copy the link. Go back to Google Cloud Virtual Machine, and I'm going to clone it. Okay, and there's my code. Let's leave it as it is. This unfortunately leaves a large prompt. Let's just live with it. That's just the way it's going to be. All right, so in there, I have my roadtrip.sql file. Let's load that into Postgres while we're at it. So let's go ahead and go into PSQL. Oops. Sweet, now we're in there. I'm going to insert that roadtrip.sql file. And it did it. It created those tables. And now what we're going to do is create a user that only has the minimum number of permissions it needs in order to fulfill all those requests that our server code has. All right, so we're going to, let's take first a look at what's there, attractions and campgrounds. So first, let's create that user. Now call that user Campy for some reason. Remember that, let's create a different one. If it returns nothing, which it seems like it's a success, that means it's not a success because it would have said great roll. Right, I'm missing that semicolon. All right, I've created foo, who cares? All right, so let's stick with Campy. I'm going to set a password for Campy. Okay, and now what we need to do is grant permissions. Okay, so we're going to grant permissions to Campy. So it's Right, so we're going to let Campy do selections and insertions on that database table attractions. And we're going to do the same thing to campgrounds. And we're going to do permissions on those two sequences, grant select and usage. Okay, and let's log out. And now let's log back in with that user Campy. And the database is, I think, task 4. Okay, whew, thought I made a mistake. Just a little typo. All right, so I'm in task 4. And let's just do a simple select statement if I can type. And it looks good. So it looks like Campy can log in and can do selections, at least on these database tables. So there's hope that we did it correctly. And let's get out of this. All right, so now let's recap. So we installed Nginx and that works. We installed Postgres, that works, and we got our code. Sweet. I guess the next order of business would be to install NodeJS. And we've been doing that. The best way to do it is to use Node Version Manager, NVM. So the best way to install that is just to search for NVM. I'm going to do that. That's going to get to the GitHub repository, and that'll give us the install command to get the latest version. So that's why we're going here. That's this curl command. And I'm going to paste that in. And now we've installed NVM. And if we type NVM here, it won't work because we need to either close this terminal and open a new one or issue that export command. I'm going to do the simple task. I just find closing better for some reason. So I'm going to leave this site. Going to go back to the cloud platform, open another SSH connection. And of course, I'm going to make this big. All right. If I say NVM now, we have it installed. All right, so we're going to use NVM to install the latest long-term service version of Node. So let's see what that version is. Do list of all the remote versions, limit it to the LTS versions. And we see it's 12.18.3, so let's install that. NVM install 12.18.3. Okay, sweet. And now let's just double check that that's what we did install. And we have 12.18.3. All right, so now we have Node installed and we can go ahead and test our server. Let me get into that directory. All right, and one thing we need is a .env file. So let's go ahead and create that .env file. I'm going to use my rusty Vim skills here. And my super secret password. And localhost just means it's running on the same machine as our Node server. If we have a larger application, we may have other machines that are actually in control of the database. So we would change localhost to those machines. So just keeping it easy by doing localhost. All right. I don't know if okay, it's saved. Let's just make sure that it's there. And that all looks good. All right, so the next step is let's actually install the Node modules. Whoop. All right, and now finally, I think we can execute our server code. Okay, so it's up and running, and in order to test that, we're going to need another terminal. So we go up here to this gear. Sorry that it's hidden away. Let me just change this so you can find. I'm just going to stop the server for a second just so we can see things. You can see this gear here, and I'm going to go and say new connection to DB work. Okay, let me make that bigger as well. All right, let me go back and start my server, which is here, and that got small. Whoop, sorry. All right, and now here, this is a way of testing. Oh, brother. Sorry. All right, I'm going to do curl HTTP. So I'm just going to check the localhost connection, port 8080. And one thing we had was search attractions. Sorry, and the argument was town. And let's just search for mag. Comma, space, New Mexico. Oh, and it helps to spell localhost. And we get the results back. So we know our code works, right? We know that it's making a connection to the Postgres server. We know we've installed the basic stuff for Node. So, hey, congratulations. We're about halfway through the install, but so far things are going great. Next, we want to convert Nginx from just a web server, which it is now. We saw that welcome to Nginx over here in this tab. We want to make it a reverse proxy server so we can access our code from anywhere. So let's go ahead and do that. So in order to do that, and I guess I can close this connection here. I'm going to leave this site, go back here, and let me stop my server. So in order to do that, we're going to need to edit a particular file, which is this file. I'll just do cat, etc. Nginx, sites available, default. That's the file we're going to be editing. That's the current configuration, and we need to change it, as I'll show shortly. Now, we can do this in a number of ways. We can just use vim, or actually sudo vim, to edit that file and make those changes. We can write the file on our laptop using our favorite editor and upload the file, or we can use the file I provided, get it to the laptop, and then upload it. I'm going to do that last one just because it's easy. All right, and that file is in the GitHub repository that we're using for this class, which is just called database class repository. Our database course, sorry. And it's in this task folder, task 4.5, default. So it's this code here. So either you can type in that code using your editor or just use this file. So I have that file locally on my machine. It's in database course, tasks, task. So it's right there under default. And let me show you how to upload that. So here's this tremendous gear. I'm going to say upload file and select where it is. I've already selected it here. So I'm going to say default. And it's finished. It's uploaded already. And it doesn't upload in the current directory. So if I do an ls here, it's not there. It's in my parent directory. So if I change directory there and do an ls, there it is. It's in my default, or in my root directory. So if I do a cat default here, there it is. That's the stuff I want in etc. Nginx sites available default. So let's move that file. Okay, so that file's moved there. It replaced the contents of that old file with the new one. And now let's just check everything looks good, especially if we were typing it in. We want to make sure that we didn't make any typos. So we can say, check the syntax of the files. And it says the syntax is fine. Everything looks good. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to restart Nginx so that those changes we made take effect. And we do that by going sudo Okay, and now let's test it. Let's see if we actually made a reverse proxy server. So the first thing we need to do is restart our server. So let's go ahead and do that. I need to change directory, don't I? Okay, our server's running, and now let's go to that Nginx that we were before and type in our search attractions, town Magdalena, and we see we get that result. So now anyone in the world can access our website, right? So no matter where we are, people can look at our site, use our code that we're writing, whatever application we have. So that's pretty cool, right? So we have something that's now accessible to everyone. But there's a rub. So let's say I stop the server and log out. Now that site's no longer available, so it'd be really cool that we could log out of Google VM and have our site still run. So that's the next task we're going to be working on, is make it so that our application doesn't stop when we log out. And for that, we're going to use what's called a process manager. And the one we're going to use is called PM2. And we install that. Let me just change directory up so I don't have such a long prompt. And for that, I'm going to install PM2 by using npm install. We've done that before. This -g we may not have seen before. That just means install it globally. So it's not specific to task 4, but it's available for any code we write on our virtual machine. And we're going to install PM2, Process Manager 2. And as this is working, let me just tell you that it's a really simple thing to use, so it's not going to be that difficult. So I'm going to clear this here, and I'm going to go to my code. All right, and that's where my server4.js file is. All right, and to start it in PM2, no surprise, it's PM2 start server4. And here we have at the very end this little table. So it gave an ID number to our server, 0. The name of the server is the name of the file, except for the .js file at the end. So we have server 4 here, and it's online. It's not using any CPU at the moment, and that's much memory it's using. So that's really cool. So now it's running, and we can go back here and just check that, yes, we get that information. And in fact, I'm not going to do it now just to save some time, but if we log out, it's still going to be running. So that's the cool part, right? If we log out, it's still going to be up and running and available to everyone. Now what happens if something goes, it's rare and pretty unlikely, but let's say that Google Virtual Machine goes down for some reason or has to restart. If that happens, PM2 will stop running, and when it reboots, right, PM2 is not going to be running, so our server is not going to be available. So that's kind of a bummer. So we don't want that to happen. So now what we want to do is make it so that if the machine goes down and starts again, we want the PM2 to automatically restart. So let's do that change. So that's a PM2 command. Let me clear this again, sorry. And let me actually change directory again to give us a better working area. So that command is PM2 and on startup systemd. And what that really tells you is that you need to execute this command in your terminal. Now, if you did that, I'll do it just to show that it's an error. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it. And it gives like, oh my God, this didn't work, and it's this command they gave. And the reason is that when it prints stuff out to the terminal, it's inserting new lines and screwing us up. So now that I have that copied, I'm going to go over to an editor here on my laptop. And I'll paste that in. And what I'm going to do is remove those new lines. So here's a new line, and I'm just going to back up and put it on that line. And here's another new line, and I'm going to do the same thing. So now that command's all on one line. I'm going to copy that, go back to Google Cloud. And now I'm going to paste that command in. And that time it worked. So now I'm not going to demo this, but if the machine goes down and restarts, your code will automatically restart. Well, PM2 first restarts, then upon startup of the machine, and then PM2 will start your machine, your server4.js file. So that's really cool. So PM2, it manages applications. It put up applications in the background. You don't have to be logged in for it to be running. So that's way cool. Let me just give you a few more basic commands of PM2. So there's PM2 status, will show you all the node stuff running, and there's only one thing running. It's good that if something's not working, if you did postman, you can see here if for some reason your system stopped, it would say stopped here or errored. You can get a whole slew of information by going PM2 info and then the name of your process. You can see there's a humongous amount of information. One of the good ones is it tells you the location of the server of your error log and your output log. So if you're printing information doing console out, or the console, you'll see that information there. PM2 stop. Stops the server. It says stopped. And that restarts the server. Now keep in mind that the server's running, you see some sort of typo or something you did wrong and you edit the code. It's not going to change the running application. You're going to have to restart that application so that change that you made to the source code has an effect. So don't be misguided like, geez, I put in some, I thought I fixed that, but I'm still getting the error, so what's wrong? Make sure you do that step of restarting. All right, so that's pretty much it. I think I've given you kind of enough scaffolding so you can get started. There are a lot of loose ends, like, it pays to dive a little bit more into Nginx and what it is. PM2 has a lot more than I'm giving you, but it's enough to complete the work that you need to complete, for at least for the first workshop. Now what happens if you need to do workshop 2, the next, or workshop version 2? How much work's involved there? Well, not too much. We've done all the work, the heavy work that we need in this virtual machine. And we're going to use one virtual machine for most of our projects, at least all the SQL projects. So what we need to do is just stop our code, right? We would do PM2 stop our server 4, or our first workshop code. We would need to clone our code for the next project. Need to install insert all the SQL files into Postgres, create a Postgres user, do that stuff. npm install to install the node modules for that new application. And then just do PM2 start that new server, so workshop v2 or whatever. So it's not that much work to, once we have all these tools in place, it's pretty easy to stop one project and start another. So I hope this video was helpful. This is actually the third time I've done the video. Once I forgot to switch microphones and have my good mic on, and the other I kind of bollocksed up, but hope this third version was a good one. So take care, everyone. Bye.